Okay, it is Monday, November the 11th, also known as Veterans Day, and they posted an announcement that there were no classes today. That's for residential people. I remind everybody that when you're online, the holidays continue with classes because we do them at home or anywhere else. Though I was at my campus today for a session. So today I'm going to share with you our weekly assignments, and then we're going to adjourn after that. I hope that you each had a chance to check out the live lecture that was done last, I think it was Thursday night, I think it was Thursday night, but anyway, I should let you know that from this point on, lectures will be on Monday nights. I did have one error in there. I had corrected it where I had posted that the lecture was going to take place on Tuesdays. So I covered all of this information. So I'm going to go down. Remember, rubrics are located in each weekly assignment, and then your discussion post. And so the live lectures, as I said, weeks 2 through 6 will all take place on Mondays beginning today, 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. And you must attend the live lecture or listen to the archive. Provide me the key phrase. And so make sure you give that information to me to get your points by Sunday for this second week. And so let's go ahead and let's take a look at our announcement for this week. So this week we're going to deal with the history of legislation that regulates drug use and abuse. And you were to read chapters 5 and 8 of the textbook. I will be sending you the PowerPoints after this session is over that you will have to correspond with that. Then we're going to cover regulation of drug precursors, regulation of synthetic drugs, and Freakonomic of drug dealing and federal activity laws. Freakonomic of crack dealing is a very interesting video which I'm going to give you a chance to view, and it'll be closed caption also as well. And then be aware that your discussion assignment for this week is mandatory sentencing for drug-related crimes. And your initial post will be due tomorrow night at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, and your reply posts are due Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time as we start our second week as a full week. Finally, you have the course project, which you didn't have any last week. What is heroin? And then also you'll have a quiz. And I do recommend that when you do the quiz, you do the quiz at the end of the week so that you will have had a chance to absorb all of the material and listen to the lectures as well. And then you know what my motto is all about. Adversity is the springboard to success. I covered that in detail during the open house, which, by the way, some people should be aware, even if you didn't check your link, that it is also available right here on the course homepage under recordings, as will week 2 when we finish here. It's going to be there. So now let's look at the course calendar. And you see where we are here. And then it again tells you when the lecture takes place, tells you when your initial posts are due, when your reply posts, and by the way, you can click on it and it opens up and it gives you more information. And then your 2 assignments that you have here, your course project, as well as your quiz. Okay, last week you only had your quiz and your discussion post there. And then you also remind to give me your keyword or phrase. And then I repeat, as I always will do every week. Always does. What kind of English is that? Anyway, as I always do, reminding you that the course ends on Friday the 13th in December. So it goes pretty fast. Pretty fast. All right? So be aware of that so you can keep that in mind. All right? So what I'm telling you is that by next week, after we finish that, we'll be halfway through the course, going into the Thanksgiving Day weekend. All right. So let's get right into week 2. Again, as I reminded you, we have this drugs and crime course guide, which is very beneficial for you to use to help you with your assignment. So it told you about module 1, and then, I told you last week how to open this, and you'll be able to see things that will help you. So it goes all the way to module 2, 3, 4, 5, and all the way to 6, and the APA as well. So now it gives you a guide to help you, tells you how to beat your test anxiety for quizzes, and you click on this, and it tells you, and then there's a test-taking tab for helpful tips to help you with that. And then your course project, consider using the library databases and web resources to begin your research. Then they give you some information. Then there's databases, articles, government websites, and then there is even a helpful video in here that helps you out. And then it tells you about how to set up a research appointment with the librarian, Dennis Johnson, who's our School of Justice Studies librarian, and also how to set up an appointment with a tutor that can help you understand the challenges relating to this class. And as I said, I advise you to seek a tutor out even if you're not having trouble. And then it tells you how you can schedule an appointment, deals with APA writing, and then again, the resource guide for writing, which you have also on your course homepage as well. All right, so that's what that guide is for, to help you out and give you some information. Okay. So now let's go back to the assignments. Then we'll do lesson content. All right, here we go. So this is the first part of your course project, and the module gives you a lot of details, and it tells you what you're going to do dealing with heroin. That's going to be your course project throughout the next 4 weeks. So you got weeks 3, 4, and 5. There is not one for week 6. And so you follow and read this fact pattern, and then a minimum of 3 pages discuss these points that are from this fact pattern. Provide at least 3 credible, reliable resources. I already told you where you can find those kind of resources using the Library and Learning Center information. And then make sure that you don't use your textbook. So use other resources other than your textbook. It's highlighted there. And never use Wikipedia. You see that all over the place, and you hear me talking about it. Citations in the body, a cover page, and a reference page. They don't count for the 3 pages. And then again, it tells you to refer to Module 2 tab, which I just showed you, in the Drugs and Crime Course Guide as well for help. So you can then click on this, the assignment itself, as I'm doing now, and it's opening up the due date, which is the 17th, and it gives you your rubric. Now, I do highly recommend using your rubric to help you with the assignments, and I recommend that as you do this, that you read this carefully and make sure that you provide. It talks about the 3 credible sources that I shared earlier, and it tells you a minimum of 3 pages. Remember, your paper should be in paragraph form and should be 3 pages minimum length, double space, not single space, double space. And then these are the APA requirements which you're well aware of. Okay. Any questions? Feel free to reach out to me, or if you have any questions now, you can type them in the chat box, and I'll address them concerning the assignment. So if you have any questions, type it in there, and I will see it, and I will address it before I adjourn. Okay? So I'm going to keep on going, moving forward. And again, and this tells you your discussion post assignment. So you follow it, it's self-explanatory, and then you follow each of those steps. And I've already talked in detail about discussion posts and the quality that I'm looking for in the discussion post. And then again, you can find information in the guides to help you with discussion posts as well. Then we come down to the quiz, which I've already shared with you and told you, ways that you can help to benefit yourself to prepare better. It's a 30-minute test, and you'll get notification of when 5 minutes, when 30 seconds, and 1 minute takes place. And once that time expires, the grade will automatically be submitted. And again, I can't click on to show you, but I can click on this to tell you again the due date on it. But if I click on anything else, begin, for example, it'll show you exam, and I'm not going to do that. Okay? And then your live key phrase that I give you at the end of this week. You'll submit that. You can submit it right after this, or you can submit it by Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. So let's go back to week 2, and let's go right to the lesson content. And our objective for this week, we're going to deal with the laws dealing with controlled substance, and we're going to deal with the legislations for these various acts. And your assignments, as I already gave you, but we're going to discuss this, regulation of drug precursors, regulation of synthetic drugs, federal laws, activities, and then freakonomics of crack dealing, which you'll find an interesting video that will help you. And it's kind of funny, has some little language in it, but it actually breaks it down. And I can tell you that I was a criminal defense lawyer, and I represented a lot of clients who were involved with drugs and dealing with the drugs, and some of the sentences. I spent quite a bit of time in what they call night court or drug court, representing individuals. So let's talk about the drug precursors. So as you know, marijuana is being legalized all over the country, and there's in Illinois, was most recently has done it, and setting up legal distribution points for marijuana. But unlike marijuana, cocaine, and heroin, which come from a plant, or methamphetamine, or meth for short, is manufactured or is cooked in what we call drug houses, some what we call crack houses. and they combine all kinds of things that you use for cleaning, such as meth it includes common insecticides, ammonia, iodine crystals, red phosphorus, even drain cleaner. Think about this as you're putting this in your body. Battery acid, lithium, which is taken from the batteries themselves, and different pseudoephedrine, ephedrine, which is mixing cold medicine. And all of this is cooked up, and they use that to make these drugs and this meth or methamphetamine, which is a very dangerous drug, and it's usually injected in a rock-like substance, like as we talk about crack cocaine, or it can be ingested through snorting it, or even sometimes even an injection with a needle. And so it gets into your system. So again, think about the ingredients that I have indicated and they've listed here, which are only some of the things that are used to make this meth. And think about that going into your body and thinking about what it does to your body or could do to your body, how people are overdosing and how people are killed from this cooking of this meth. I've also witnessed situations where in doing this, there have been explosions, there have been houses that blew up, caught fire, and people were injured in the cooking process. So we, as in law enforcement, I used to be, as I shared in my story last week, I used to be the village attorney, prosecutor, and police officer in a town called Ford Heights, which was, we used to label that as the crack cocaine capital of the south suburbs. And there were so many of those houses that people actually took over, and they would cook this stuff on a stove using these various chemicals, and it was common to have fires and explosions. Now, because these meth labs can be moved quickly, and they are able to keep us on our toes if we're in law enforcement. And because of these laboratories that are not like sophisticated laboratories, they put them in. They can put them in trunks of cars, and and do it in abandoned buildings, and even in some roadside ditches. So, in order to reduce this meth, there were laws that Congress passed on the federal level to deal with that, called the Combat Methamphetamine Epidemic Act of 2005. And what it did was basically attempt to remind stores, pharmacies of certain non-prescription products that contain pseudoephedrine, ephedrine, phenamine, and they were placed behind the counter. You know how you used to be able to go in the drugstore and you would see some of these things out open? Well, they decided that they had to do a control mechanism because people were buying those things in large numbers, and they were taking those things, and if they were buying them in large numbers, they would use it to cook methamphetamines. So what happened with this law, it required that the persons who were buying this had to show identification and sign a logbook for their purchases. And this was an attempt, again, to control that. Now, do you really think that the people who were the drug dealers and using it would really sign up? Probably not. They have what we call straw people, and they'd have different individuals that would come in, and they would purchase a small quantity. And so what it did was it tried to reduce the purchases. However, with the straw people that were used, it might have reduced some of the labs, but the manufacturing on a large scale still continued. And then we include the factor of Mexican drug trafficking organizations, cartels. You may recall that El Chapo was arrested and locked up, and that put a dent in it, but his son began to cover it. And what you should be aware of is that the chain of command in those cartels, which we'll be discussing a little later on in this course, provide information which make it clear that even if you get the head leader, that there's going to be someone to carry it on. And so basically, with the help of these cartels, these things are distributed and manufactured throughout this country. And then there's this little think about it at the end. It says, determine if your state has passed laws to restrict the purchase of these items that I talked about. And then the question is, do you think that the laws have an impact on meth production and related criminal activity? And I already answered that, but I'll reiterate it again. No, because they find loopholes and ways to get around the distribution, manufacture of these drugs. And so it's like a cat and mouse game that continues on and on and on. I once said, and we'll say this probably a gazillion number of times in this course, that the only solution to really minimize it is to take away the customers, you know, and to help people who are hooked on this to become recovering addicts, and then they won't have the need for it. So it's like any other item that you sell, that if there's no market for it, what happens is that that sale begins to die off or decrease, and it diminishes the ability. So the key thing is, if there's someone who still wants this and need it, they're still going to get it either way. So that's my position on that question about the law. Having been a lawyer for a long time, a defense lawyer, I can tell you that that the change that has come over people has not been because of the laws. People are not concerned about what the effects that will happen to them, or there's not the deterrent effect, and that the thing that will help people is generally the approach that if you took the Introduction to Corrections course, and we talk about the various theories, you get into where you rehabilitate people and provide opportunities for people to be cured. Because I said it before, and again, I'll say it a million times, that the epidemic issue of the use of drugs is based on a health problem that we have. And you're going to see that law enforcement in some of the weeks coming up in the future have started to move in that direction and recognize that, and not just lock people up, put them back out in the streets, because if you don't cure the problem, then they're going to go back to doing it. It's just like if a person goes into a hospital and they have an illness, if you don't take care of that illness and you just let them rest a little bit, go back out, if they need medication such as antibiotics or whatever they need, they'll still be in the same state that they're in. And that's the same thing with drugs. So now let's talk about synthetic cannabinoids. Now, what exactly are these things? Well, to be honest with you, they are legal items, or should I say alternatives to laboratory items, and sold as alternatives to marijuana. Now, you'll find these usually in some of these, like the mom and pop convenient type stores, but they're created in labs, and the ingredients and purity is not known to what that person is. Keep in mind, see, you'll find out that some of these names will tell you, such as K2 and spice. And those things, they look like candy. They are not candy. They're sold in, as I said, convenience stores, on the internet, and many of them are created overseas in Asia, places like that, and then smuggled into the United States. And in some instances, the chemical property, listen to this, as it says, cannot be detected through drug screening or urinalysis, which makes it very appealing because people can pass a drug test and still utilize these items. And so it is a problem. And then we look, though, at the problems that it affects, as I said earlier. Public health and poisoning centers get a lot of these individuals, and they find that those individuals come in, and the cannabinoids provide situations where people have increased their heart rate and blood pressure, which cause them sometimes to become unconscious, vomiting, seizures, have hallucinations, agitation, and even anxiety. So basically, we call it going on a trip, and that's what it would send a person. So to regulate and deal with these, there was the Synthetic Drug Abuse Prevention Act, which, as it says, placed 26 types of these synthetic cannabinoids in Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substance Act, and many states, at this time, it was 43 states, taking action to control these items. But it's still a problem. It's still a problem. Prior to 2010, they were not controlled by any state or federal laws. And so the bottom line is this, good people, is that they're still out there. It's 2019. And take a look at these pictures. You probably have gone to some of those stores and you've seen them and didn't realize what they were. But there are people, listen to me, people. There are grammar school kids who are getting these things, high school kids, and kids who, don't, really get in trouble. But what they do is they find themselves in a situation where they go on these trips and they don't come back. They'll have heart attacks that result in death, and as I said, it's seizures. Another item that we deal with here are what we call bath salts. Have nothing to do with taking a bath. And these particular drugs, they're not for medicine. It's not like, what's that called, Epsom salt, so it's not that. But these things are not labeled correctly, and they're sold as they say, bath salts, plant food, or freshener to trick purchasers into thinking that the drugs are mild. But bath salts are also dangerous and result in individuals who orally take them or smoke them, result in agitation, insomnia, instability, dizziness, depression, paranoia. Paranoia, that could cause you to commit a crime, that can cause you to kill yourself or hurt someone, delusional, suicidal thoughts, seizures, panic attacks, and your heart can explode. And that's, you know what, when a person takes crack cocaine, and what they do is they get a high. And then after that, they decide that they want to try to get that high level back. Well, once you do it that first time, and I learned this in the police academy, that the second time you do it, in order to get there or exceed that, you increase the dosage. And every time you do that, you're putting your body into a situation where it's like a pressure cooker, and your heart will literally in your body say boom and explode like a balloon, and you're dead, and you're gone. And so the other alternative is what happens with these things is that there were individuals who took a trip, and they talk about this 2012 publicized incident that happened in Miami where this person, the zombie attack place, where a person who's naked, high on these bath salts, he would chew on the face, cannibalism of a homeless man, and attack before the police finally were able to subdue and arrest him. So these are abnormal activities that take place because of using these bath salts. And then the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Authority, published some laws or final orders to control 3 synthetic stimulants used to make bath salts, which are methadone, methylhydrophamine, or MDPV. I mispronounced them too. Methadone. I have some of my nursing students or medical assisting students to help in the pronunciation of some of these items. And then, so what has happened is that they keep passing laws to make possession of these products illegal in the United States. And once again, the key thing is to get these people free from that, or as we say, deliver them from relying on those items. And then finally, the law, once again, attempts to keep up with these items ahead of scheduling laws. So again, it's another cat-mouse thing that takes place in March 15th through the 19th is often referred to as National Youth Synthetic Drug Awareness Week. And what they do is they educate youth, because that's who really is kind of really going on these trips, young people, and they're dying because of that. So produce some education. I'm going to skip over this for a minute, and then I'm going to come back to it. But I want to show you a minute what you can do yourself to help you in terms of summarizing the materials. Again, I'll remind you, I'll be sending you the PowerPoints at the conclusion of this, and then I will convert this to a YouTube video, and then you'll see the video of the lecture itself. So you can do these questions. And I'm not going to do them, but I'm just going to say, if you read this first federal law to regulate psychotic drugs imposed a tax on opium and cocaine, and required manufacturers, importers, pharmacists, and physicians prescribing narcotics to be licensed. And so you'll go through, you'll see this in your material, and also materials that I've covered in the lecture, and you put in your answer, and then you go to the next one. So I'm not going to do that again. So you can do that on your own. All right. So now I want to introduce you to a very interesting video. I am going to remove my headset, so otherwise. Back after that, let me take my video. Let me go to my video, and okay, video should be gone for now. So now let's take a look at this very interesting video. It's about 20 minutes or so long. So very interesting. Let me make sure that I have it set up for your closed captions. Subtitles, okay, are on. Okay, so you should see subtitles as well. So pay close attention to this, and we'll be back to conclude for the night.
You're happy to know that I'll be talking not about my own tragedy, but other people's tragedy. But it's going to be lighthearted about other people's tragedy than your own, and I want to keep in the spirit of the conversation. So if you If you believe the media accounts, being a drug dealer in the height of the crack cocaine epidemic was a very glamorous life, in the words of Virginia Pascal. There was money, there was drugs, guns, women, you name it, jewelry, bling bling, it had it all. Okay? What I'm going to tell you today is that, in fact, based on 10 years of research, a unique opportunity to go inside a gang, to see the actual books, the financial records of the gang, that the answer turns out not to be that being in the gang was a glamorous life, but I think more realistically, that being in a gang, selling drugs for a gang, is perhaps the worst job in all of America. And that's what I'd like to convince you of today. Okay, so there's three things I want to do. First, I want to explain how and why crack cocaine had such a profound influence on inner city gangs. Secondly, I want to tell you how somebody like me came to be able to see the inner workings of a gang. It's an interesting story, I think. And then third, I want to tell you in a very superficial way about some of the things we found when we actually got to look at the financial records, the books of the gang. Okay, so before I do that, just one warning, which is that this presentation has been rated R by the Motion Picture Association of America. It contains adult themes, adult language. Given who's up on the stage, you'll be delighted to know that, in fact, there'll be no nudity, barring a unexpected wardrobe malfunctions. Okay, so let me start by talking about crack cocaine and how it transformed the gang. Okay, and to do that, you have to actually go back to a time before crack cocaine in the early 80s. Look at it from the perspective of a gang leader. Okay, so being a gang leader in the inner city wasn't such a bad deal in the mid-80s, the early 80s, let me say. Now, you had a lot of power, you had to beat people up, you got a lot of prestige, a lot of respect. But the thing is, there was no money in it. Okay? The gang had no way to make money. You couldn't charge dues to the people in the gang because the people in the gang didn't have any money. You couldn't really make any money selling marijuana. Marijuana's too cheap, it turns out. There's just no market for being. You can't get rich selling marijuana. You couldn't sell cocaine. So cocaine's a great product, powder cocaine, but you got to know rich white people. And most of the inner city gang members didn't know any rich white people. They couldn't sell that market. You couldn't really do petty crime either. It turns out petty crime is a terrible way to make a living. So as a result, as a gang leader, you had, power, pretty good life. But the thing was, in the end, you were living at home with your mother. And so it wasn't really a career. It was something that, there were limits to how powerful and important you could be if you had to live at home with your mother. Okay. Then along comes crack cocaine. Okay. And in the words of Malcolm Gladwell, crack cocaine was the extra chunky version of tomato sauce for the inner city. Okay. Because crack cocaine was an unbelievable innovation. I don't have time to talk about it today. But if you think about it, I would say that in the last 25 years, of every invention or innovation that's occurred in this country, the biggest one in terms of impact on the well-being of people who live in the inner city was crack cocaine. Okay, and for the worse, not for the better, for the worse. It had a huge impact on life. So what was it about crack cocaine? It was a brilliant way of getting the brain high. Okay, because you could smoke crack cocaine and you can smoke crack cocaine, you can't smoke powder cocaine, and smoking is a much more efficient mechanism of delivering a high than it is snorting it. And it turned out there was this audience that didn't know it wanted crack cocaine, but when it came, it really did. And it was a perfect drug you could buy the cocaine that went in for $1, sell it for $5, highly addictive. The high was very short. So for 15 minutes, you get this great high. And then when you come down, all you want to do is die again. Okay, it created a wonderful market. And for the people who were there running the gang, it was a great way, seemingly, to make a lot of money. At least for the people on the top. Okay, so this is where we enter the picture. Not really me. I'm really a big player in all this. My co-author, Sudhir Venkatesh, is the main character. Okay, so he was a math major in college who had a good heart and decided he wanted to get a sociology and PhD. Came to the University of Chicago. So the 3 months before he came to Chicago, he had spent following the Grateful Dead. And in his own words, he looked like a freak. Okay, he's a South Asian, very dark-skinned South Asian, big man, and he had hair, in his words, down to his ass. Okay, defied all kinds of boundaries. Was he black or white? Was he man or woman? It was really a curious sight to be seen. So he showed up at the University of Chicago, and the famous sociologist William Julius Wilson was doing a book that involved surveying people all across Chicago. And he took one look at Kadir, who was going to go do some surveys for him, and decided he knew exactly the place to send him, which was to one of the toughest, most notorious housing projects, not just in Chicago, but in the entire United States. So Kadir, the suburban boy who never really been in the inner city, beautifully took his clipboard and, walked down to this housing project, gets to the first building. First building, well, there's nobody there, but he hears some voices up in the stairwell. So he climbs up the stairwell, and he comes around the corner and finds a group of young African-American men playing dice. Okay. This is about 1990, peak of the crack epidemic. This is a very dangerous job being in a gang. You don't like to be surprised. You don't like to be surprised by people coming around the corner. And the mantra was, shoot first, ask questions later. Okay. Now, Kadir was lucky. He was such a freak. And the clipboard probably saved his life because he figured no other rival gang member would be coming up to shoot at them with a clipboard. So his greeting was not particularly warm. But they did say, well, okay, let's hear your questions on your survey. So I kid you not, the first question on the survey that he was sent to ask was, how do you feel about these war classes? Makes you wonder about academics, okay? Well, so the choice of answers were very good. Good. What Kadir found out is, in fact, that the real answer was the following. The survey was not, in the end, going to be what got Kadir off the hook. He was held hostage overnight in the stairwell. There was a lot of gunfire. There were a lot of philosophical discussions he had with the gang members. By morning, the gang leader arrived, checked out Kadir, decided he wasn't no threat, and they let him go. So Kadir went home, took a shower, took a nap. And you and I, probably faced with a situation, would think, well, I guess I'm going to write my dissertation on the Grateful Dead. I've been following it the last 3 months. Kadir, on the other hand, got right back, walked down to the housing project, went up to the floor, the second floor, and said, hey guys, I had so much fun hanging out with you last night. I wonder if I could do it again tonight. And that was the beginning, what turned out to be a beautiful relationship that involved Kadir living in the housing project on and off for 10 years, hanging out in crack houses, going to jail with the gang members, having the car window shot out of his car, having the police break into his apartment, steal his computer disks, you name it. But ultimately, the story has a happy ending for Kadir, who became one of the most respected sociologists in the country. And especially for me, as I sat in my office with my Excel spreadsheet open, waiting for Kadir to come and deliver to me the latest load of data that he would get from the gang. It's one of the most unequal co-authoring relationships ever, but I was glad to be the beneficiary. Okay, so what do we find? What do we find in the gang? Well, let me say one thing. So what we really got access to everybody in the gang. We got an inside look at the gang from the very bottom up to the very top. They trusted Kadir in ways that really no academic has ever, or really anybody, any outsider has ever earned the trust of these gangs. To the point where they actually opened up what was most interesting for me is their books, their financial records that they kept, and they made them available to us. And we not only could study them, but we could ask them questions about what we were doing. So if I have to kind of summarize very quickly in the short time I have what the sort of the bottom line of what I take away from the gang is that if I had to draw a parallel between the gang and any other organization, it would be that the gang is just like McDonald's, okay? In a lot of different respects, the restaurant McDonald's. Okay, so first, in one way, which isn't maybe the most interesting way, but it's a good way to start, is in the way it's organized, the hierarchy of gang, the way it looks. So here's what the org chart of the gang looks like. I don't know if any of you know very much about org charts, but if you were to kind of strip down and simplify McDonald's org chart, this is exactly what the org chart would look like. Now, it's amazing, but the top level of the gang, they actually call themselves the board of directors. Okay? And as Shadir says, it's not like these guys had a very sophisticated kind of view of like what happened in American corporate life, but they had seen movies like Wall Street, and they kind of had learned like a little bit about what it was like to be in the real world. Now, below that board of directors, you've got the essentially what are regional VPs, people in control, say the south side of Chicago or the west side of Chicago. Now, Shadir got to know very well the guy who had the unfortunate assignment of trying to take the Iowa franchise, which it turned out for this black gang was not one of the more brilliant financial endeavors that they undertook. Okay. The thing that really makes the gang seem like McDonald's is this franchising. That the guys who are running, the local gangs, the 4 square block by 4 square block areas, they're just like the guys who are running McDonald's. They are the entrepreneurs. They get the exclusive property rights to control the drug selling. They get the name of the gang behind them for merchandising and marketing. And they're the ones who basically make the profit or lose the profit depending on how good they are at running the business. Now, the group I really want you to think about, though, are the ones at the bottom, the foot soldiers. And these are the teenagers typically who'd be standing out on the street corners selling the drugs. Extremely dangerous work. And important to note that almost all of the weight, all of the people in this organization are at the bottom. They're just like McDonald's. So in some sense, the foot soldiers are a lot like the people who are taking the order at McDonald's. And it's not just by chance they're like them. In fact, in these neighborhoods, they'd be the same people. So the same kids who were working in the gang were actually, at the very same time, they would typically be working part-time at a place like McDonald's. Okay? Which already, I think, foreshadows the main result that I've talked about what a crappy job it was being in the gang. Because obviously, if being in the gang was such a wonderful, lucrative job, why in the world would these guys moonlight at McDonald's? Okay? So what do the wages look like? So you might be surprised, but based on the actual, being able to talk to them and to see their records, this is what it looks like in terms of the wages. The hourly wage the foot soldiers were earning was $3.50 an hour. It was below the minimum wage. And this is well documented. It's easy to see by the patterns of consumption they have. It really is not fiction, it's fact. There was very little money in the gang, especially at the bottom. Now, if you manage to rise up, say, be that local leader, the guy who's equivalent of the McDonald's franchisee, you'd be making $100,000 a year. And that, in some ways, was the best job you could hope to get if you were growing up in one of these neighborhoods as a young black male. If you manage to rise to the very top, $200,000 or $400,000 a year is what you'd hope to make. Truly, you will be a great success story. And one of the sad parts of this is that, indeed, among the many other ramifications of crack cocaine, is that the most talented individuals in these communities, this is what they were striving for. They weren't trying to make it in legitimate ways because there were no legitimate channels out. This was the best way out. And it actually was the right choice, probably, to try to make it out this way. You look at this, the relationship with McDonald's breaks down here. The money looks about the same. Why is it such a bad job? Well, the reason it's such a bad job is that there's somebody shooting at you a lot of the time. Okay? So we're shooting at you. What are the death rates? Okay? We found in our gang, and admittedly, this is not really sort of a standard situation. This was a game of a time of intense violence, of a lot of gang wars. This gang actually became quite successful, but there were costs. And so the death rate, not to mention the rate of being arrested, sent to prison, being wounded, the death rate in our sample was 7% per person per year. You're in the gang for 4 years, you expect to die with about a 25% likelihood. Okay? That is about as high as you can get. So just for comparison purposes, let's think about some other walk of life where you may expect might be extremely risky. Like let's say that you were a murderer and you were convicted of murder and you're sent to death row. Turns out the death rates on death row from all causes, including execution, 2% a year. Okay? So it's a lot safer being on death row than it is selling drugs out on the street. Okay? That makes you pause, gives you some pause, those of you who believe that the death penalty is going to have an enormous deterrent effect on crime. Now, to give you a sense of just how bad the inner city was during crack, and I'm not really focusing on the negatives, but really there's another story to tell you there. If you look at the death rates just of random young black males growing up in the inner city in the United States, the death rates during crack were about 1%. That's extremely high. This is violent death. It's unbelievable in substance. Put it into perspective, if you compare this to the soldiers in Iraq, for instance, right now, fighting the war, 0.5%. So in some very literal way, the young black men who were growing up in this country were living in a war zone very much in the sense of the way that the soldiers over in Iraq are fighting a war. Okay, so why in the world, you might ask, would anybody be willing to stand out on the street corner selling drugs for $3.50 an hour with a 25% chance of dying over the next 4 years? Why would they do that? Okay? And I think there are a couple answers. I think the first one is that they got fooled by history. It used to be the gang was a rite of passage, that the young people controlled the gang, that as you got older, you dropped out of the gang. Okay? So what happened was the people who happened to be in the right place at the right time, the people who happened to be leading the gang in the mid to late 80s became very, very wealthy. And so the logical thing to think was that, well, the next generation, so they're going to age out of the gang like everybody else has, and the next generation is going to take over and get the wealth. Okay? So there are striking similarities, I think, to the internet boom. Right? The first set of people in Silicon Valley got very, very rich. And all my friends said, maybe I should go do that too. And they were very cheap for stock options that never came. Okay? In some sense, that's what happened exactly to the set of people we were looking at, is that they were willing to start at the bottom, just like, say, a lawyer at a law firm, a first-year lawyer is willing to start at the bottom, work 80-hour weeks for not that much money, because they think they're going to make partners. But what happened was the rules changed, and they never got to make partner. Indeed, the same people who were running all of the major gangs in the late 1980s are still running the major gangs in Chicago today. They never passed on any of the wealth, so everybody got stuck at that $3.50 an hour job, and it turned out to be a disaster. The other thing the gang was very, very good at was marketing and trickery. And so, for instance, one thing the gang would do is, the gang leaders would have big entourage, and they'd drive fancy cars, and have fancy jewelry. So what Sedura eventually realized as he hung out with them more is that really they didn't own those cars, they just leased them, because they couldn't afford to own the fancy cars. And they didn't really have gold jewelry, they had gold-plated jewelry. It goes back to the real versus the fake real. And really, they did all sorts of things to trick the young people into thinking what a great deal the gang was going to be. So, for instance, they would give a 14-year-old kid, they'd give him a whole, roll of bills to hold. That 14-year-old kid would say, oh, well, he would say to his friends, hey, look at all the money I got in the gang. It wasn't his money until he spent it, and then essentially he was in debt to the gang or sort of an indentured servant for a while. Okay, so I have a couple minutes. Let me do one other thing I hadn't thought I'd have time to do, which is to talk about what we learn more generally about economics from the study of the gang. Okay, so economists tend to talk in technical words. Often our theories fail quite miserably when we go to the data. But actually, what's kind of interesting is that in this setting, it turned out that some of the economic theories that worked not so well in the real economy work very well in the drug economy, in some sense because it prevents better capitalism. Here's an economic principle. This is one of the basic ideas in labor economics. It's called the compensating differential. It's the idea that basically the increment of wages that a worker requires to leave him indifferent between performing two tasks, one which is unpleasant to the other, that's what you call a compensating differential. It's why we think garbage men might be paid more than people who work in parks. Okay? So in the words of the gang, one of the members of the gang, I think, makes this clear. So it turns out, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself, it turns out in the gang, when there's a war going on, that they actually pay the foot soldiers twice as much money. Okay, it's exactly this concept, because they're not willing to be at risk. So here's, in the words of a gang member, captured it quite nicely. He says, would you stand around here when all this shit, that means shooting, if all this shit's going on? No, right. So if I'm going to be asked to put my life on the line, then front me the cash, man. So essentially, I think the gang member says it much more articulately than does the economist about what's going on. Here's another one. So economists talk about game theory, that every two-person game has an equilibrium. Here's the translation you get from a gang member. They're talking about the decision of why they don't go shoot. One thing that turns out to be a great business tactic in the gang is to go and just shoot in the air, just shoot guns in the other gang's territory. All the people are afraid to go buy the guns there, they're going to come in your neighborhood. So, but here's what he says about why they don't do that. He says, if we start shooting around there in the other gang's territory, nobody, and I mean you dig it, nobody going to step on their turf. But we got to be careful, because they can shoot around here too, and then we all fucked. Okay? So that's exactly the same concept. But then again, sometimes economists get it wrong. So one thing we observed in the data is that it looked like, in terms of the gang leader always got paid. Okay? He always, no matter how bad it was economically, he always got himself paid. So we had some theories related to cash flow and lack of access to capital markets and things like that. And then we asked the gang member, well, why did you always get paid? Your workers don't always get paid. His response is, you got all these niggers below you who want your job, you dig? If you start taking losses, you was weak and shit. Okay? I thought about it. CEOs often pay themselves $1 million bonuses even when companies are losing a lot of money. And it never would really occur to economists that this idea of weak and shit could really be important. So maybe weak and shit is an important hypothesis. Thank you very much.
Okay, that
a very interesting video, and you know, we have I've shared that with students throughout teaching this class, and there's the interesting part about it is that I, as a lawyer, represented many people who were out there. They were what we call the foot soldiers, and so they would be sacrificed. I also used to get instructions as a lawyer from the gang leaders, and there was a guy named Larry Hoover who was the head of what they call the BGDs, or Black Gangster Disciples, and he was incarcerated, but we would go get instructions as far as cases were concerned, and then they would, you know, pay us handsomely. And I'm not going to tell you how they paid us, but it wasn't checks. We didn't have receipts or any of those things. But that's the way it worked. And so there are all kinds of things that happen. But what I want to say to you is that young people, you know, they give them Jordans, they give them all kinds of designer gear, they give them what they call blingage. And you heard what he said is that it's not gold, it's gold plated. So it's fool's gold, as we call it. And so these young people, you know, they hadn't had anybody to look out after them. Now, in studying gangs, I had a course that I taught that there is a lecture that I did about why people join gangs. And one of the reasons is because they felt that their parents or guardian, whoever, didn't care about them, but that the gang leaders would, you know, dress them and give them nice stuff. And then they would see the gang leaders, as was stated, driving these nice cars, which they would discover. They didn't know that they were leased cars. All they knew is they'd seen them driving these expensive cars. And they would also find many of them who lived in these nice houses and things like that. So anyway, the point of the matter is that they decided, man, I'm going to go work for them. And then they'd offer them more money than working at McDonald's, which, as he said, is a place where you get paid less. You get paid more as a drug dealer out there on the streets, but there's always somebody shooting at you. So not too many people are shooting at you at McDonald's. So the point of the matter is that individuals would constantly find themselves desiring to do that. And so I'm going to ask you if you have any questions. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box about anything, assignments, comments, and so forth at this time. Anything? If there's nothing, say nothing. I'm not going to call your names out, but you're here. You can do that. If not, any comments or questions? No questions. Okay. That was one person. What about the other person? Any questions or concerns about anything, the assignments that you need clarified? Anything? Okay. Going once, going twice. That's about it. And so I want to give you the key phrase to get your points. Crack cocaine. That's it. So give that to me, and I only say it once. So you need to provide that for me, and you'll get your points. Get those to me no later than Sunday. And in the meantime, I'm going to adjourn this session and say good night to you. And I hope to see you again next Monday night, the same time, and for another lecture. And I hope that you'll begin to recognize how drugs have affected the community. And boy, as we get deeper into this, there's going to be some longer videos that may take us longer, but I'm going to show those videos in full. The reason is because you need to see those videos anyway, such as one called Chasing the Dragon, which we're going to be going through in a few weeks. It's a very lengthy one, but you're going to need to look at it in order to complete the assignment. So if those of you who are in the live lecture will have an advantage over those who don't. So I'm going to say good night to you and see you next week. All right. You're welcome.